Hi and welcome into another AWS tutorial on this channel. Today we will be talking about VPC in AWS. VPC is a virtual private cloud and it's a separate network environment for your account and for your services. So we will go to the console and see what we can do with it. Alright, so we are already logged into AWS Console and let's navigate to VPC. Isolated Cloud Resources. Let's go to VPCs. So maybe just very briefly. The general unit is VPC, but in VPC you will be having a subnets, so like another parts of the network, and subnets can be either public or private. When you have a public network, then it's accessing internet by itself and the services have their own public IP addresses and the traffic is being routed with so-called Internet Gateway, so it can have access to the internet. When we have a private subnet, then it is hidden, let's say, in our private network. So the service like EC2 instance, ECS container, or database has a private IP address, and if you want to have access to internet from the private subnet, you are using something like NAT Gateway to route the traffic to the internet, and as you can see here, NAT Gateway is part of the equation. So let's navigate to VPC. I have one here, the default one created, but let's click on Create button. And we can choose either we will choose here VPC only and we will write everything about VPC, but if you are more new to AWS, you can click VPC and more, and here we will have a graph and we will be able to create private and public subnets. So today let's use a graph, but later we will use also VPC and Terraform, and we will be writing all this stuff together. So let's firstly call it a name, so briefly test. CIDR block, which we will use. If you would like to know more about CIDR block, we have a blog post on that on briefly.dev. We are explaining how many IPs and what CIDR is. So when we will assign this CIDR block from that we will get 65,000 IPs. We won't be using IPv6 right now, and here there is a very easy form to fill in. So number of availability zones, we can take 1, or we can take 2, or we can take 3, and as you can see here on this graph, in each availability zone there will be a public and private network connected. So let's choose 2. Let's do 2 public subnets and 2 privates, and as you can see here, 1 and 2nd availability zone, 2 public subnets and 2 private ones. NAT Gateway, let's do it like none for now, so the public subnets will have public IP addresses and access to the internet. Private will be separated to private ones. But if we would click here the NAT gateways, let's say in 1AZ, then you would see that it goes through the NAT gateway. So public subnets, here is the route showed. It's going from VPC to public subnet. From public subnet there is a route table. This is a table where you write how you want to route the traffic. So you are giving the CIDR blocks, IP addresses, and where they should go. So in this particular example, they are going to EGW, so Internet Gateway, And for private subnets, as you can see here, it goes through the private route table and then it goes to NAT Gateway. So it will have access to the internet, let's say for a database, to download the updates. All right, the next thing, VPC endpoints. VPC endpoints, this is something that we will talk later in the future, but generally VPC endpoints are used for accessing AWS sources from the private networks. If you are in a public network and have public IP and access to the internet through internet gateway, you don't need to worry about VPC endpoints. But if you have a private subnet, and in private subnet you want to access such resources like S3 to download or upload files, KMS to use keys for encryption and decryption, then you would need to use VPC endpoints, which will route your traffic from the private subnet through to AWS services without traversing the public network. So let's right now keep it to none. And DNS, host names and resolutions, we will leave it as enabled. DNS and Route 53 and everything related to that will be also a topic for another hands-on. So let's create ourselves a VPC. And now AWS infrastructure will be created. So we are creating the VPC. We are creating our 4 subnets, 2 public ones, 2 private ones. We are creating an internet gateway, attaching it to this VPC. We are creating route tables. And right now we are waiting for NAT gateway so that our private networks would access the internet. Then we will have some another route tables, their associations, and so on. So let's just wait a moment for it to create. If it will take too much time, I will speed up the video so that you don't have to wait. And it's done. Let's click View VPC. And here is our new created VPC, and that's our subnets, route tables, and network connections. And right now, let's say if we would like to create an EC2 instance for any of our services, and we would navigate to EC2 and click Launch. Then we would be able, in the network settings, to configure it. So we would be able to pick our VPC. This is the one we created, the briefly.test VPC. And here we would be able to pick one of the subnets that we created. So either one of the public ones in 2 availability zones or either private ones. So that's generally a very brief overview of VPC and its components. See you next time in another tutorial.